Hello, everyone. Welcome to a special web edition of Good Morning America Health. I'm Tanya Rivero. There's a new self-help book that many are saying seems just too good to be true. It's called The 4-Hour Body, and it claims to teach you how to do everything from lose 20 pounds in 30 days without exercise to have a 15-minute orgasm. Now, we've asked the author of The 4-Hour Body, Timothy Ferriss, and Dr. Karen Boyle, a surgeon at the Greater Baltimore Medical Center, to join us today to discuss this new diet and fitness book. Welcome to both of you. Thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks, Tanya.
So, Tim, I'm going to start with you. You call this book a guide to becoming superhuman. Now, you're not a doctor, correct? So how did you come to write about the claims you make in the 4-Hour Diet?
No, this is a very valid question. So for me, it's really about access. After the 4-Hour Work Week, which was #1 on the New York Times, I have access to the best scientists, the best athletes, coaches in the world, and I have good data. So I was able to track hundreds of people and test a lot of things that just have not been tested in the field. And that is how the book came to be.
And you followed your own advice, correct? Your own body changed after going through your own procedures, correct? And we do
That's
have
right.
some before and after pictures that we're going to put up. But tell us how that worked out.
So I tested everything in the book on myself first. So it came from the scientific literature or the experts, then I tested it on other people. In the photos you're showing, I believe it's when I gained 34 pounds of muscle in 28 days, which was supervised by Dr. Peggy Plato at San Jose State University.
And how exactly did you do that?
Very, very infrequent workouts. So I actually did 2 30-minute resistant training workouts per week. So in this case, it was literally 4 hours of exercise for the entire month. And then lots of strategic overfeeding that you have to be careful with, of course, so you don't gain fat. But I actually lost 3 pounds of fat and reduced my cholesterol from about 222 to 147 during that same period of time.
Strategic overfeeding. Now, what exactly do you mean by that phrase?
What I mean by that is to gain that amount of muscle, you do have to consume a lot of calories, but you want to minimize the likelihood that you're going to gain fat, of course. And you do that by taking specific types of supplements like alpha-lipoic
Oh,
acid.
because she said that. Okay.
All right, so Dr. Boyle, you've read the book and listening to what Tim is talking about. What do you think of all of this? Is it just hype?
Well, I think it is sounding a little bit too good to be true. I mean, I think what works maybe for Tim may not work for your average reader. And my concern is not that it can't be done, but should it be done that way, and is it safe and durable? Is this something that a person can sustain this kind of diet and activity to not only lose weight healthfully, but also keep the weight off?
All right, so let's talk about one of the main, one of the talking points in your book, Tim, was that you can learn to prevent fat gain while still binging. I guess, again, this is strategic binging, but it's probably something that many people would be excited to learn how to do.
Right.
Tell us what your basis for that statement is, and then Dr. Boyle, maybe you can comment.
So the basis for that statement, I interviewed a lot of people about behavioral change, like BJ Fogg, who's the head of the Persuasion Lab at Stanford University. And what we realize is people are going to binge whether they plan it or not. So by building in 1 day a week, let's say Saturday, to eat what people enjoy, they can actually stick with and be sustainable on that diet for a very long period of time. And it also improves conversion of thyroid hormone, let's say T4 to T3. Ultimately, it leads to more fat loss. And we track this with hundreds of people to make sure that was the case.
Are there any parameters to that binging, though? Because certainly one person's binge doesn't look like another's.
Right. Absolutely. So there are some guidelines to minimize the damage in the chapter Damage Control, but really no, you don't have to count calories. The entire point is you don't feel restrained for that 24-hour period so that you can actually follow the diet for the other 6. And there are people who've done this for years.
But isn't the diet basically an Atkins-like diet with a cheat day? I mean, that's what it kind of read like to me.
It's not an Atkins diet as most people understand it, being ketogenic. The goal is not ketosis. You are eliminating refined carbohydrates and most grains for that 6-day period, which I believe to be very, very important based on talking to the biologists and so forth that I've spoken with. But it's very sustainable. So 58% of the people that we tracked said it was the first diet they'd ever been able to stick with. So I view it more like a way of eating. It's just that diet is the term most easily understood by most people.
Certainly very interesting
When you look at some of the
claims.
case reports, I mean, some of the cases that you cite here, some of these people on their binge day are eating thousands and thousands of excess calories. So for you, when I read it, I was like, well, I believe it. I mean, obviously it worked for you. But for your average person, are they going to really be able to binge and restrict binging and not then just pick up cheat days along the way?
This is a very good question. importance of scheduling it and limiting it to that 1-day time frame is very important. Some people will end up limiting it to one binge meal, but it has been very, very effective. And it's based on studies, and I just want to, these are about 30 pages of references, scientific references that form the basis of the book. So far so good is what I'll say.
All right, I'd like to move on to another topic really quickly, because Tim, you also say in your book that you can sleep 2 hours a day and still feel rested. I'm sort of fascinated by this because we could all use the extra awake hours. Tell us how this works.
So some of these chapters, I'll say, are used to demonstrate what the body is capable of. I don't expect many people to do the 2 hours a day, but it's referring to something called polyphasic sleep. So Edison and others were famous for doing this, where they would break up their sleep into multiple portions throughout the day. And when you do that, you're able to limit the total number of hours and still feel fully rested because you increase the percentage of REM sleep. That's how it works.
And Dr. Boyle, what's your medical reaction?
They're big studies. I mean, there have been large studies out of UCSD and other institutions looking at hundreds of thousands of patients, finding that the optimal number of hours of sleep are 6 to 7. And when you go below that number, you actually increase your rate of obesity, diabetes, hypertension, and decrease longevity and survival. So although I understand your explanation of polyphasic sleep and trying to maximize your REM, I don't necessarily think that's safe to do. Having lived on that kind of sleep as a surgical resident and being my own experiment, I just can't imagine your average person really being able to sustain that. It's interesting, but probably not good for your average person to do.
So just a few really quick points. So Dr. Boyle, you're absolutely right. With monophasic sleep, if you're getting it in one block, you do need those 6 to 8 hours, in some cases more. I like to get 9.5. But if you are following the polyphasic approach to Uberman, which is the 2 hours, 2.5 hours per day, it is sustainable. I'm actually gathering data right now using EEGs and other devices to show that it is possible. But you're absolutely right. If you're getting it in one block and you can't take 6, 7, 8 naps per day.
But why would you want to? Why would you want to have 20-minute episodes of sleep 6 times a day? Isn't that difficult for your average person to maintain with a job and family? I mean, what is the benefit of that?
It's impossible for most people. But again, it's to show that if you can get to 2 hours, there's certainly methodical ways, let's say you're a new mother, so that you can strategically plan your sleep so you don't feel as tired. That's the point. I'm showing extreme examples.
So if you're in sort of like a lockdown mode and you're in a survival mode, then you could do this, but not for your average person.
So it is possible, but maybe not ideal for most people. I want to move on to one last point. Tim also gives tips for producing 15-minute orgasms in his book. Dr. Boyle, you specialize in reproductive medicine. Is this even possible?
Well, I want to call to your definition of orgasm. When you look at your definition of orgasm in the book, it may not actually be what most people would think of as a true orgasm. I think that you're referring more to the complete orgasmic experience with initiation, excitement, plateau orgasm, and resolution. I think it's great that you're tackling this, but I think it's a little misleading to say that, oh, if you follow these step-by-step guidelines, which I think are really well illustrated, by the way, that you're going to experience a 15-minute orgasm. I think it's a little hard to believe.
No, so you're right that the term orgasm is very slippery, especially in the US. It's not, there is no universal consensus on what orgasm means. So most people refer to orgasm as the involuntary contraction that women experience, let's say. So you wouldn't be experiencing that for the entire 15 minutes, I'm sure.
But don't you think that's a little misleading on the book to say that way? That was my take on it as a reader.
I suppose that if people expect to have one single powerful contraction for 15 minutes, then you could read the headline as misleading. But I think that you can certainly, in many female subjects, I had to do case studies here, but for many women, they can experience repeated contractions for those 15 minutes. That's not that uncommon. But it's not going to be one single contraction. I think that'd be very uncomfortable.
All right, Timothy Ferris and Dr. Boyle, thank you so much. Lots of fascinating claims. I'm sure we will continue to debate them for a while now, but that's all the time we have for this special web extra edition of GMA Health. You can always get more of the latest medical news at the health page of abcnews.com.